So I'm going to start reading Genesis. Genesis 15. The Lord's covenant promise to Abraham. Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abraham in a vision and said to him, "Do not be afraid, Abraham, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great." But Abraham replied, "O sovereign Lord, what good are you? What good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir." Then the Lord said to him, "No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own, who will be your heir." Then the Lord took Abraham outside and said to him, "Look up into the sky and count the stars, if you can. That's how many descendants you will have." And Abraham believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. Then the Lord told him, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land as your possession." But Abraham replied, "O sovereign Lord, how can I be sure that I will actually possess it?" The Lord told him, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old male goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." So Abraham presented all these to him and killed them. Then he cut each animal down the middle and laid the halves side by side. He did not, however, cut the birds in half. Some vultures swooped down to eat the carcasses, but Abraham chased them away. As the sun was going down, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and terrifying darkness came down over him. Then the Lord said to Abraham, "You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in foreign lands, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. As for you, you will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. After your generations, your descendants will return here to this land for the sins of the Amorites. Do not yet warrant their destruction." After the sun went down and darkness fell, Abraham saw a smoke and fire part, and a flaming torch passing between the halves of the carcasses. So the Lord made a covenant with Abraham that day and said, "I have given this land to your descendants, all the way from the border of Egypt to the great Euphrates River, the land now occupied by the Canaanites, Kenites and Kadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Shushites, and Jebusites." Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, verse 6. Although Abraham had demonstrated his faith through his actions, his belief in the Lord made him right with God. See Romans chapter 4, verse 1, verse 5. We too can be right with God by trusting Him. Church attendance, prayer, and good deeds will not make us right with God. A right relationship is based on faith. The heart-filled inner confidence that God is who He says He is and does what He says He will do. Obedience is a result of a good relationship with God. Genesis 16, the birth of Ishmael. Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarah said to Abraham, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant." Perhaps I can have children for her. And Abraham agreed with Sarah's proposal. So Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abraham as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abraham had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abraham had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarah with contempt. Then Sarah said to Abraham, "This is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now she's pregnant, and she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me." Abraham replied, "Look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see it fit." Then Sarah treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, "Hagar, Sarah's servant, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarah," she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority." Then he added, "I will give you more descendants than you can count." And the angel also said, "You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael," which means God's hears. "For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. The son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives." Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who has spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." She also said, "Have I truly seen the one who sees me?" So that well was named Beersheba, which means well of the living, one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Beran. So Hagar gave Abraham a son, and Abraham named him Ishmael. Abraham was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. Abraham is named Abraham in chapter 17, Genesis chapter 17. So it says a little article. So Sarah laughed out loud when God told her she would have a baby in her old age. But God wasn't joking. God had promised to give Abraham a son earlier. Sarah had tried to take matters into her own hands. Sarah's action caused her anger and tears. But God got the last laugh. In Sarah's story, God did the impossible and gave her a son. Even though she was 90 years old, she named her son Isaac, which means he laughs. Good things happen when we have faith in God's timing. So you can find more of Sarah's story in Genesis chapter 11, verse 23. Genesis chapter 11, Genesis 23, or Genesis 25. So we're in Genesis chapter 7. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am El Shaddai, God Almighty. Serve me faithfully. It's one of God's names, and live a blameless life. I will make a covenant with you, by which I will guarantee to give you countless descendants. At this, Abraham fell face down on the ground. Then God said to him, "This is my covenant with you. I will make the father of a multitude of nations. What's more, I'm changing your name. It will no longer be Abraham. Instead, you will be called Abraham. For you will be the father of many nations. I will make you extremely fruitful. Your descendants will become many nations, and the kings will be among them. I will confirm my covenant with you and your descendants after you, from generation to generation. This is the everlasting covenant. I will always be your God, and the God of your descendants after you. And I will give the entire land of Canaan, where you now live as a foreigner, to you and your descendants, and it will be the possession forever, and I will be their God." the mark of the covenant. Then God said to Abraham, your responsibility is to obey the terms of the covenant. You and all your descendants have this continued responsibility. This is the covenant that you and your descendants must keep. Each male among you must be circumcised. You must cut off the flesh of your foreskin as a sign of the covenant between me and you. From generation to generation, every male child must be circumcised on the 8th day after his birth. This applies not only to the members of your family, but also to the servants born in your household and the foreign-born servants whom you have purchased. All must be circumcised. Your bodies will bear the mark of my everlasting covenant. Any male who fails to be circumcised will be cut off from the covenant family for breaking the covenant. Sarah is named Sarah. Then God said to Abraham regarding Sarah, your wife, her name will no longer be Sarah. From now on, her name will be Sarah, and I will bless her and give you a son from her. Yes, I will bless her richly, and she will become the mother of many nations. Kings of nations will be among her descendants. Then Abraham bowed down to the ground, but he laughed to himself in disbelief. How could I become a father of the age of 100? He thought, and how can Sarah have a baby when she is 90 years old? So Abraham said to God, may Ishmael live under your special blessing. But God replied, no, Sarah, your wife, will give a birth to a son, and you will name him Isaac, and I will confirm my covenant with him and his descendants as an everlasting covenant. As for Ishmael, I will bless him also, just as you have asked. I will make him extremely fruitful and multiply his descendants. He will become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will be confirmed with Isaac, who will be born to you. And Sarah, about this time next year, when God had finished speaking, he left Abraham. And on that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael and every male in his household, including those born there and those he had brought. Then he circumcised them, cutting off their foreskins, just as God had told him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and Ishmael, his son, was 13. Both Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised on that day, along with all the other men and boys of the household. Whether they were born there or bought as servants, all were circumcised with him. So we're in Genesis chapter 18. A son is promised to Sarah. The Lord appeared again to Abraham near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. One day Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent during the hottest part of the day. He looked up and noticed 3 men standing nearby, and when he saw them, he ran to meet them and welcomed them, bowing low to the ground. My Lord, he said, if it pleases you, stop here for a while. Rest in the shade of the tree while water is brought to you, wash your feet. And since you honored your servant with this visit, let me prepare some food to refresh you before you continue on your journey. All right, they said, do as you have said. So Abraham ran back to the tent and said to Sarah, hurry, 3 large measures of your best flour, knead it into dough, and bake some bread. Then Abraham ran out to the herd and chose a tender calf and gave it to her, his servant, who quickly prepared it. When the food was ready, Abraham took some yogurt and milk and the roasted meat, and he served it to the men. As they ate, Abraham waited on them in the shade of the trees. Where is Sarah, your wife? The visitors asked. She is inside the tent, Abraham replied. Then one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, "How can a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, 'Can an old woman like me have a baby?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about the time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh." But the Lord said, "No, you did laugh." Abraham intercedes for Sodom. And then when the men got up from their meal and looked out towards Sodom, as they left, Abraham went with them to send them on the way. "Should I hide my plan from Abraham?" the Lord asked. "For Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. I have singled him out so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, when I will do for Abraham all that I have promised." So the Lord told Abraham, "I have heard the great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is so flagrant. I am going down to see if their actions are as wicked as I have heard. If not, I want to know." The other men turned and headed towards Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham. Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Suppose you find 50 righteous living in their city. Will you sweep it away and not spare it for their sakes? Surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroying the righteous along with the wicked. Why, you would be treating the righteous and the wicked exactly the same. Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all earth do what is right?" And the Lord replied, "If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire city for their sake." Then Abraham spoke again, "Since I have begun, let me speak further to my Lord. Even though I am but dust and ashes, suppose there are only 40 righteous people rather than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And the Lord said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 righteous people there." Then Abraham pressed his request further. "Suppose there are only 40. And the Lord replied, "I will not destroy it for the sake of the 40. Please don't be angry, my Lord." Abraham pleaded, "Let me speak. Suppose only 30 righteous people are found." And the Lord replied, "I will not destroy it if I find 30. Then Abraham said, "Since I have dared to speak to the Lord, let me continue. Suppose there are only 20. And the Lord replied, "Then I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Finally, Abraham said, "Lord, please don't be angry with me. If I speak one more time, suppose only 10 are found there." And the Lord replied, "Then I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. When the Lord had finished his conversation with Abraham, he went on his way, and Abraham returned to his tent. So we're in Genesis chapter 20. No, Genesis chapter 19, sorry. And there's like 50 pages in Genesis. Genesis chapter 19. So that even the two angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. Then he welcomed them and bowed with his face to the ground. He said, My lords, he said, come to my home to wash your feet and be my guests for the night. You may then get up early in the morning and be on your way again. Oh no, they replied. We're just spending the night out here in the city square. But Lot insisted. So at last they went home with him. Lot prepared a feast for them, complete with fresh bread made without yeast, and they ate. But before they retired for that night, all the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. They shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them." So Lot stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind him. "Please, my brothers," he begged, "don't do such a wicked thing. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. But please leave these men alone, for they are my guests and are under my protection." "Stand back," they shouted. "This fellow came to town as an outsider, and now he's acting like our judge. We'll treat you far worse than those other men." And they lunged toward Lot to break down the door. But the 2 angels reached out and pulled Lot into the house and barred the door. And then they blinded all the men, the young and old, who were at the door of the house. So they gave up trying to get inside. Meanwhile, the angels questioned Lot, "Do you have any other relatives in the city?" They asked, "Get them out of this place, your sons-in-laws, son-daughters, or anyone else, for we are about to destroy the city completely. The outcry against this place is so great. It has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot rushed out to tell his daughters, "Finances, quick, get out of the city. The Lord is about to destroy it." But the young men thought he was only joking. At dawn the next morning, the angels became insistent. "Hurry," they said to Lot. "Take your wives and your 2 daughters who are here and get out right now, or you will be swept away in the destruction of the city." When Lot still hesitated, the angel seized his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and rushed them to safety outside the city, for the Lord was merciful. When they were safely out of the city, one of the angels ordered, "Run for your lives and don't look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, or you will be swept away." "Oh no, my lord," Lot begged. "You have been so gracious to me and saved my life, and you have shown such great kindness. But I cannot go to the mountains. Disaster will catch up to me there, and I would soon die. See, there is a small village nearby. Please let me go there instead. Don't you see how small it is? Then my life will be saved." "All right," the angel said. "I will grant your request. I will not destroy the little village. But hurry, escape to it, for I can do nothing until you arrive there." This explains why that village was known as Zar, which means little place. Lot reached the village just as the sun was rising over the horizon. Then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah. He utterly destroyed them, along with the other cities and villages of the plain, wiping out all the peoples and every bit of vegetation. But Lot's wife looked back as she was following behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Abraham got up early in that morning and hurried out to the place where he stood in the Lord's presence, and he looked out across the plain toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and he watched as columns of smoke rose from the cities, like smoke from a furnace. But God has listened to Abraham's request and kept Lot safe, removing him from the disaster that endangered cities on the plain. Genesis chapter 19, verse 14. Lot had lived so long among ungodly people that he was no longer a believable witness for God. He had allowed his environment to shape him rather than shaping his environment. When Lot finally took a stand, nobody listened. Do those who know you see you as a follower of Christ? Or are you a chameleon like Lot? Just one of the crowd, blending into your environment. If you want to make a difference, you must first decide to be different and take a stand for what is right. Lot and his daughters. So afterward, Lot left Zoar because he was afraid of the people there, and he went to live in a cave in the mountains with his 2 daughters. One day the older daughter said to her sister, "There are no men left anywhere in the entire area, so we can get married like everyone else, and our father will soon be too old to have children. Come, let's get him drunk with wine, and then we will have sex with him. That way we will preserve our family line through our father." So that night they got him drunk with wine, and the older daughter went in and had intercourse with her father. He was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. The next morning the daughter said to her sister, "I had sex with our father last night. Let's get him drunk with wine again tonight, and you go in and have sex with him. That way he will preserve our family line through our father." So that night they got him drunk with wine again, and the younger daughters went in and had intercourse with him. As before, he was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. As a result, both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their own father. When the older daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Moab, and he became the ancestor of a nation now known as the Moabites. When the younger daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Ben-Ammi. He became the ancestor of the nation now known as the Ammonites. Wait, guys. So you want to know how can 2 daughters become incest with the father? Apparently, Lot's daughters had themselves been affected by the Canaanite culture, so that their consciences were not bothered by what they proposed. With all they knew destroyed, including their finances, and with little hope for the future, they were so desperate to have children to preserve the family line and to support themselves in old age that they resorted to incest. The Canaanite culture, known for their variety of sexual practices even in its religious worship. What was a shrine prostitute? Read Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 17. It is like that the addictive nature of sexual perversion escalated until it took on an aggressive and hostile expressions described in here. Certainly the kind of violence the men of Sodom threatened, wicked. See why does God call homosexual sexual behavior detestable? Leviticus 18:22. Leviticus 18. Wait. Leviticus. I'm trying to read these. Let's see. She said 127. It's not Leviticus. 173. So it says in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 22, it says, "Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, that is detestable." Sex with someone of the same gender, as well as sex with a relative, a neighbor's wife, or an animal, violates God's design with its inherent boundaries. Homosexual intercourse was called wicked in Sodom. Genesis chapter 19, verse 5 or 7, and was seen in the New Testament as a sin. Romans chapter 1, verse 26. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9. For the more on the application of these and other laws today, see the article, "How are these laws relevant to us today?" So we're in chapter Abraham 20. So I said, okay. Now can you hear me? Abraham chapter 20. Abraham was moved. Abraham deceives Amalek. Abraham moved south to the Negev and lived for a while between Kadesh and Shur, and then he moved to Gerar while living there as a foreigner. Abraham introduced his wife Sarah by saying, "She is my sister." So King Amalek of Gerar sent for her Sarah and had her brought to him at his palace. But that night God came to Amalek in a dream and told him, "You are a dead man, for that woman you have taken is already married." But Abraham had not slept with her yet. So he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Didn't Abraham tell me she is my sister?" And she herself said, "Yes, he is my brother. I act in complete innocence. My hands are clean." In the dream, God responded, "Yes, I know you are innocent. That's why I kept you from sinning against me, and why I did not let you touch her. Now return the woman to her husband, and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet. Then you will live. But if you don't return to him, you can be sure that you and all your people will die." Amalek got up early the next morning and quickly called all his servants together. And when he told them what had happened, his men were terrified. Then Amalek called for Abraham. What have you done to us? He demanded. What crime have I committed that deserves treatment like this, making me and my kingdom guilty of this great sin? No one should ever do what you have done. Whatever possessed you to do such a thing? Abraham replied, I thought this is a godless place. They will want my wife and will kill me to get her. And she really is my sister, for we both have the same father, but different mothers. And I married her. When God called me to leave my father's home and to travel from place to place, I told her, do me a favor. Wherever we go, tell the people that I am your brother. Then Amalek took some of his sheep and goats, cattle, and males, and female servants, and he presented them to Abraham. He also returned his wife Sarah to him. Then Amalek said, look over my land and choose any place where you would like to live. And he said to Sarah, look, I'm giving your brother 1,000 pieces of silver in the presence of all these witnesses. This is to compensate you for any wrong I may have done to you. This will settle any claim against me, and your reputation is cleared. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Amalek, his wife, and his female servants, so they could have children. For the Lord was caused all the women to be infertile because of what happened with Abraham's wife, Sarah. So we're in Genesis 21. The birth of Isaac. The Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant and she gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And Abraham named their son Isaac. 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. And Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse a baby? Yet I have given Abraham a son in his old age. Hagar and Ishmael sent away. When Isaac grew up and was about to be weaned, Abraham prepared a huge feast to celebrate the occasion. But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar making fun of her son Isaac. So she turned to Abraham and demanded, get rid of that slave woman and her son. He is not going to share the inheritance of my son Isaac. I won't have it. This upset Abraham very much because Ishmael was his son. But God told Abraham, do not be upset over the boy and your servant. Do whatever Sarah tells you, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. But I will also make a nation of the descendants of Hagar's son, because he is your son too. So Abraham got up early the next morning, prepared food and a container of water, and strapped him on Hagar's shoulders. Then he sent her away with their son, and she wandered aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone, she put the boy in the shade of a bush, and then she went and sat down by herself about 100 yards away. I don't want to watch the boy die, she said, as she burst into tears. But God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven, Hagar, what is wrong? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Go to him and comfort him, for I will make a great nation from his descendants. Then God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well full of water, and she quickly filled her water container and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness. He became a skillful archer, and he settled in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother arranged for him to marry a woman from the land of Egypt. So let's read we're in chapter 22, Genesis 22. Genesis chapter 22. Abraham's faith was tested. Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you. And the Lord said this to him to see if he would do this, to show how much he loves the Lord and wants to obey the Lord. The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took the two of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire, for a burnt offering, and set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Stay here, with the donkey. Abraham told the servants, the boy and I will travel a little further. We will worship there, and then we will come right back. So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offerings on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. We have the fire and the wood, the boy said, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son. Abraham answered, and they both walked on together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Don't lay a hand on the boy. The angel said, do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named that place Yahweh, Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. Genesis chapter 22, 1. Verse 2, why did God ask Abraham to sacrifice his son? God did not want Isaac to die. He wanted Abraham to prove that he loved God more than he loved his long-awaited son. Through this difficult experience, Abraham strengthened his commitment to God. He also learned about God's ability to provide. The purpose of testing is to strengthen our character and deepen our commitment to God. Are you feeling like you're being tested right now? Yeah, I'm being tested by people surrounded by me and sometimes negativity from other people. So God's probably using them people to test me, like to see if I'm going to remain strong in him, regardless of whoever doesn't like me of my faith. So, are you feeling like you're being tested right now? How will you respond? A proverb. On the mountain of the Lord it would be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. This is what the Lord says. Because you have obeyed me and have not withheld even your son, your only son, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants and beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies. And through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed, all because you have obeyed me. And we'll read Hebrews next after the Genesis. Then they returned to the servant and traveled back to Beersheba, where Abraham continued to live. Soon after this, Abraham heard that Milcah, his brother Nahor's wife, had borne Nahor's 8 sons, and the oldest was named Uz. The next oldest was Buz, followed by Kemuel, the ancestor of the Arameans. Kasher, Hazar, Padas, Jabash, and Bethel became the father of Rebekah. In addition to these 8 sons from Milcah, Nahor had 4 other children from his concubine Rimai, and their names were Taba, Gama, Kadash, Maba. So we was in 22. So I'm going to read this article. I'm going to read this article in my Bible. Would God ever ask us to do wrong? 22 verse 2. No, but he might push us to the limit of our ability to trust him. The first words of this chapter. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. Suggests that God never really intended the sacrifice of Isaac to take place. The point was the test. Did Abraham really trust God? We are shocked by the situation today because we know the Bible's strong commands against child sacrifice in Leviticus chapter 20 verse 1, Jeremiah chapter 32 verse 35, and 2 Kings chapter 23 verse 10. That's what pagan gods demanded, not the holy God of Israel. Because the biblical laws against child sacrifice came later, we can't be sure that Abraham understood about the practice. Even so, God had shaped Abraham's values. This request would not have been as consistent with God's character as Abraham had come to know him to this point. So perhaps Abraham was confused by the nature of God's command. But even though God commanded Abraham to sacrifice the son promised to him, the writer of Hebrews states that Abraham was reasoning that God could even raise the dead. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 19. The laughter of disbelief when Abraham had been promised a son with his aged wife had become a firm confidence in the God who had made and kept his promise, that promise. God's command was harsh even for the ancients, but Abraham believed God would fulfill his promise through Isaac. It makes us ask ourselves, will we entrust our futures unreservedly to the God Abraham trusted? Although the true and living God prohibits child sacrifice, in a sense, he still asks for a human sacrifice. But it's a living sacrifice he wants, not a dead one. Romans chapter 12, verse 1. See why the article, why did God require in Exodus 20:24 require sacrifices. Exodus 20, verse 24. see. So it says, Exodus 20:24, make an altar of the earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed. How would the private parts be exposed? Exodus 20:26. Pagan religions of that day often featured altars with steps. By not allowing such artichurch, Israel would be less likely to include paganism in their worship. This phrase may refer to the ritual prostitution that occurred at pagan altars. God approved places of worship. God would select only certain sites for Israel to worship. This is in contrast to the people of Canaan who built countless private shrines for Baal, Asherah, and other pagan gods. When the Israelites erected private altars, idol worship usually followed. We know that. I'm at 24, right? No, 23. So we know why they sacrifice animals, because they didn't have a savior, Jesus, at that time, so they used animals. Why did God require sacrifices? Exodus 20:24. Many people have wondered how God has honored by an animal being killed. The key to understanding this sacrificial system is not found in the animals or in the gift or grain, oil or wine that were used in various Old Testament sacrifices. Rather, the key is this: God's holiness requires that sin not be ignored. Someone must pay the price to remove the offense. Once the price is paid, the sin can be forgiven. Sacrifices were God's way of teaching this spiritual truth to his people. Another important concept is that innocent can substitute for the guilty. God allows a sin God had allowed a sin. Where am I? God had allowed a sin payment to be made on behalf of someone else. In the Old Testament, these payments were animal or food sacrifices. When offered in faith, these pointed to the ultimate sacrifice, Christ's death for the sins of the world. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 1, verse 10. The sacrifices also involved offering something valuable as a token of gratitude to God. Just as today we give money of other gifts to acknowledge that God is the source of all we have. The people in the Old Testament days offered God the best of their flocks and fields to give thanks for his provision. Finally, the sacrifices systems also performed an important community function, just as the New Testament church celebrated the Lord's Supper, honoring Christ's sacrifice, as part of the love feast. See Jude chapter 12. The Old Testament sacrifices were often performed as a part of community meals. From being a wasteful destruction of animals, the food offered as a sacrifice was generally eaten either by the priest or by the entire worshiping community. Genesis chapter 23. The burial of Sarah. When Sarah was 127 years old, she died at Keref, I don't know how to say that, Keref Araba, now called Hebron, in the land of Canaan. There Abraham mourned and wept for her. Then leaving her body, he said to the Hittite elders, "Here I am, a stranger and a foreigner among you. Please sell me a piece of land so I can give my wife a proper burial." The Hittites replied to Abraham, "Listen, my lord, you are an honored prince among us. Choose the finest of our tombs and bury her there. No one here will refuse to help you in this way." Then Abraham bowed low before the Hittites and said, "Since you are willing to help me in this way, be so kind as to ask Ephraim, son of Zorah, to let me buy his cave at Meshevlah down at the end of the field. I will pay the full price in the presence of witness. So I will have a permanent burial place for my family." Ephraim was sitting there among the others, and he answered, Abraham, as the others listened, speaking publicly before all the Hittite elders of the town. "No, my lord," he said to Abraham, "please listen to me. I will give you the field in the cave here in the presence of my people. I give it to you. Go and bury your dead." Abraham again bowed low before the citizens of the land. And he replied to Ephraim, as everyone, "Listen. No, listen to me. I will buy it from you. Let me pay the full price for the field so I can bury my dead there." Ephraim answered Abraham, "My lord, please listen to me. The land is worth 400 pieces of silver, but what is that between friends? Go ahead and bury your dead." So Abraham agreed to Ephraim's price and paid the amount he had suggested. 400 pieces of silver weighed according to the market standard. The Hittite elders witnessed the transaction. So Abraham bought the plot of land belonging to Ephraim at Meshevlah near Mamre. This included the field itself, the cave that was in it, and all the surrounding trees. It was transferred to Abraham as his permanent possession in the presence of the Hittite elders at the city gate. Then Abraham buried his wife Sarah there in Canaan in the cave of Meshevlah near Mamre, also Haran. So the field and the cave were transferred from the Hittites to Abraham from use as permanent burial. So we're at Genesis chapter 24. A wife for Isaac. Abraham was now a very old man, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. One day Abraham said to his older servant, the man in charge of his household, Take an oath by putting your hand under my thigh. Swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Go instead to my homeland, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son Isaac. The servant asked, but what if I can't find a young woman who is willing to travel so far from home? Should I then take Isaac there to live among your relatives in the land you come from? No, Abraham responded. Be careful never to take my son there. For the Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house in my native land, solemnly promised to give this land to my descendants. He will send his angel ahead of you, and he will see to it that you find a wife there for my son. If she is unwilling to come back with you, then you are free from this oath of mine. But under no circumstances are you to take my son there. So the servant took an oath by putting his hand under the thigh of his master, Abraham. He swore to follow Abraham's instructions. Then he loaded the 10 of Abraham's camels with all kinds of expensive gifts from his master, and he traveled to the distant Aram Naharaim. There he went to a town where Abraham's brother Nahor had settled. He made the camels kneel beside a well just outside the city town. It was evening, and the women were coming out to draw water. O Lord God of my master Abraham, he prayed, please give me success today and show unfailing love to my master Abraham. See, I am standing here beside the spring, and the young women of the town are coming out to draw water. This is my request. I will ask one of them, please give me a drink from your jug. And if she says yes, have a drink, and I will water your camels too. Let her be the one you have selected as Isaac's wife. This is how I will know that you have shown unfailing love to my master. Before he had finished praying, he saw a young woman named Rebekah coming out with her water jug on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, who was the son of Abraham's brother Nahor and his wife, Milcah. Rebekah was very beautiful and old enough to be married, but she was still a virgin. She went down to the spring and filled the jug and came up again, running over to the servant and said, please give me a little drink of water from your jug. Yes, my lord, she answered. Have a drink. And she quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and gave him a drink. When she had given him a drink, she said, I draw water for your camels too until they have enough to drink. So she quickly emptied her jug into the water, and ran back to the well to draw water for all his camels. The servant watched her in silence, wondering whether or not the Lord had given him success in his mission. Then at last, when the camels had finished drinking, he took out a gold ring for her nose and 2 large gold bracelets for her wrists. Whose daughters are you? He asked, and please tell me, would your father have any room to put us up for the night? I am the daughter of Bethuel, she replied. My grandparents and Nahor and Milcah. Yes, we have plenty of straw and feed for the camels, and we have room for guests. Inner beauty is the inner beauty of a beautiful woman, gentle, not wild, hostile, not evil, causing other people distress. That's the evil woman. Inner beauty, Genesis chapter 24, verse 15, verse 16. Rebekah had physical beauty, but Abraham's servant was looking for a sign of inner beauty. Our appearances is important to us, and we spend lots of time trying to prove the way we look. But the inner beauty is even more important. How do we develop inner beauty? Patience, kindness, love toward others, and joy are among the beauty treatments that help us become truly lovely on the inside. The man bowed down low and worshiped the Lord. Praise the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, he said. The Lord has shown unfailing love and faithfulness to my master, for he has led me straight to my master's relatives. The young woman ran home to tell her family everything that had happened. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, who ran out to meet the man at the spring, and he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on her sister's wrist, and he had heard Rebekah tell what the man had said. So she rushed out to the spring, where the man was still standing beside his camels. Laban said to him, "Come and stay with us, you who are blessed by the Lord. Why are you standing here?" Yeah, we're in Genesis chapter 24 still. Outside the town, when I have a room all ready for you and a place prepared for the camels. So the man went home with Laban, and Laban unloaded the camels and gave him straw for their bedding, fed them, and provided water for the man and the camel drivers to wash their feet. Then the food was served, but Abraham's servant said, "I don't want to eat until I have told you why I have come." "All right," Laban said, "tell us." "I am Abraham's servant," he explained, "and the Lord has greatly blessed my master. He has become a wealthy man. The Lord has given him flocks of sheep, goats, and herds of cattle, a fortune in silver and gold, and many male and female servants, and camels and donkeys." When Sarah, my master's wife, was very old, she gave birth to my master's son, and my master has given him everything he owns. And my master made me take an oath. He said, "Do not allow my son to marry one of those local Canaanite women. Go instead to my father's house, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son." But I said to my master, "What if I can't find a young woman who is willing to go back with me?" He responded, "The Lord in whose presence I have lived will send his angel with you and will make your mission successful. Yes, she must find a wife for my son from among my relatives, from my father's family. Then you will have fulfilled your obligation. But if you go to my relatives and they refuse to let her go with you, you will be free from my oath." So today when I came to the spring, I prayed this prayer. "O Lord, my God, and my master Abraham, please give me success on this mission. See, I'm standing here beside the spring. This is my request. When a young woman comes to draw water, I will say to her, 'Please give me a little drink of water from your jug.' And if she says yes, have her drink, and I will draw water for your camels too. Let her be the one you have selected to be the wife of my master's son." Before I had finished praying in my heart, I saw Rebekah coming out with her water jug on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water. So I said to her, "Please give me a drink." She quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and said, "Yes, have a drink, and I will water your camels too." So I drank, and then she watered the camels, and then I asked, "Whose daughters are you?" She replied, "I am the daughters of Bethuel, and my grandparents are Nahor and Mecca." So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. Then I bowed low and worshipped the Lord, and I praised the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, because he had led me straight to my master's niece to be his son's wife. So So tell me, will you or won't you show unfailing love and faithfulness to my master? Please tell me yes or no, and then I'll know what to do next. Then Laban Bethuel replied, the Lord has obviously brought you here, so there is nothing we can say. Here is Rebekah, take her and go. Yes, let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed. When Abraham's servant heard their answer, he bowed down to the ground and worshipped the Lord. And then he brought out silver and gold jewelry and clothing and presented them to Rebekah. He also gave expensive presents to her brother and mother. Then they ate their meal, and the servant and the men with him stayed there overnight. But early in the next morning, Abraham's servant said, send me back to my master. But we want Rebekah to stay with us at least 10 days. Her brother and mother said, then she can go. But he said, don't delay me. The Lord has made my mission successful now. Send me back so I can return to my master. Well, they said, we'll call Rebekah and ask her what she thinks. So they called Rebekah. Are you willing to go with this man? They asked her. And she replied, yes, I will go. So they said goodbye to Rebekah and sent her away with Abraham's servant and his men. And the woman who had been Rebekah's childhood nurse went along with her. And they gave her this blessing as she departed. Our sister, may you become the mother of many millions, and may your descendants be strong and conquer the cities of their enemies. Then Rebekah and her servant girls mounted the camels and followed the man. So Abraham's servant took Rebekah and went on his way. Meanwhile, Isaac, whose home was in the Negev, had returned from Beersheba. One evening, as he was walking and meditating in the fields, he looked up and saw the camels coming. When Rebekah looked up and saw Isaac, she quickly dismounted from her camel. Who is that man walking through the fields to meet us? She asked the servant. And he replied, it is my master. So Rebekah covered her face with her veil. And then the servant told Isaac everything he had happened. And Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent, and she became his wife. He loved her deeply, and she was a special comfort to him after the death of his mother. So we're in Genesis chapter 25. I'm about to be done with, I probably will just read 25 and just be done right here, or maybe both 25 and 26. The death of Abraham, Genesis chapter 25. Abraham married another wife whose name was Keturah. She gave birth to Zebron, Joshua, Midian, Ishbak, and Shelah. Joshua was the father of Sheba and Didian. The Didian's descendants were the Ishriites, Lishriites, and Limonites, and Midian's sons were Epher, Ephir, Haniach, Abijah, and Eldra. They were all descendants of Abraham through Korea. These names are so hard to pronounce. Abraham gave everything he owned to his son Isaac, but before he died, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them off to a land in the east, away from Isaac. Abraham lived for 175 years, and he died at a ripe old age, having lived a long and satisfying life. He breathed his last breath and joined his ancestors in death. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Makpah near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, son of Zerah, the Hittite. This was the field Abraham had purchased from the Hittites and where he had buried his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his sons Isaac, who settled near Beersheba, this Negev. Ishmael's descendants. This is the account of the family of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, through Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian servant. Here is a list by their names and clans of Ishmael's descendants. The oldest was Nebaioth, followed by Kedar, Adbeel, Mizpram, Mishra, Doma, Massa, Hadad, Timah, Jetur, Nashrish, and Kedmiah. These 12 sons of Ishmael became the founders of 12 tribes named after them, listed according to the places they settled and camped. Ishmael lived for 137 years. Then he breathed his last breath and joined his ancestors in death. Ishmael's descendants occupied the region from Havilah to Shur, which is east of the Egyptian, in the direction of Asher. There they lived in an open hostility toward all their relatives. The birth of Esau and Jacob. This is the account of the family of Isaac, the son of Abraham. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Besher the Aramean from Padan Aram, and the sister of Laban and Aramean. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. The Lord answers Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. But the two children struggled with each other in her womb. So she went to ask the Lord about it. Why is this happening to me, she asked. And the Lord told her, the sons in your womb will become two nations. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger and the other, and your older son will serve your younger son. And when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair, like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. Then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Israel's heel. So they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. Esau lost his birthright. As the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter. He was an outdoorsman, but Jacob was a quiet, temperament, preferring to stay at home. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating the wild game Esau brought home, but Rebekah loved Jacob. One day when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau arrived home from the wilderness, exhausted and hungry. Esau said to Jacob, I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew. This is how Esau got his other name, Edom, which means red. All right, Jacob replied, but trade me your rights as the firstborn son. Look, I'm dying of starvation, said Esau. What good is my birthright to me now? But Jacob said, first, you must swear that your birthright is mine. So Esau swore on the oath, thereby selling all his rights as the firstborn to his brother Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Ezra ate the meal and then got up and left, and he showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. Genesis chapter 25, verse 29, verse 33. Ezra traded the lasting benefits of his birthright for the immediate pleasure of food. The pressure of the moment distorted his perspective and made his decision seem urgent. Can you relate when you see something you want? What's your first impulse? Do you have to have what you want right away? Or are you usually willing to wait? We can avoid making Ezra's mistake by comparing the short-term satisfaction with its long-range consequences before we act. Jealousy, Genesis chapter 26, verse 12, verse 16. God kept his promise to bless Isaac. The neighboring Philistines grew jealous because everything Isaac did seemed to go right, so they filled up his wells with dirt and tried to get rid of him. Jealousy can tear apart the mightiest of nations or the closest friends. When you find yourself becoming jealous of others, try thanking God for their good fortune and thank God for what he has already given you. A thankful attitude is a helpful way to keep jealousy and anger under control. So we're at Genesis chapter 26. A severe famine struck the land as had happened before in Abraham's time. So Isaac moved to Gerar, where Amalek, king of the Philistines, lived. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt, but do as I tell you. Live here as a foreigner in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I earthly confirm that I will give all these lands to you and your descendants, just as I solemnly promised Abraham your father. I will cause your descendants to become as numerous as the stars of the sky, and I will give them all these lands, and though through your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed. I will do this because Abraham listened to me, obeyed all my requirements, commands, decrees, and instructions." So Isaac stayed in Gerar. And when the man who lived there asked Isaac about his wife Rebekah, he said, "She is my sister." He was afraid to say, "She is my wife." He thought they would kill me to get her because she is so beautiful. But some time later, Amalek, king of the Philistines, looked out the window and saw Isaac caressing Rebekah. Immediately, Rebekah called for Isaac and examined. "She is obviously your wife. Why did you say she is my sister?" "Because I was afraid someone would kill me to get her from me," Isaac replied. "How could you do this to us?" Rebekah exclaimed. "One of my people might have easily taken your wife and slept with her, and you would have made us guilty of great sin." Then Rebekah issued a public proclamation. "Anyone who touches this man or his wife will be put to death." The conflict over water rights. When Isaac planted his crops that year, he harvested 100 times more grain than he planted, for the Lord blessed him. He became a very rich man, and his wealth continued to grow. He acquired so many flocks of sheep and goats and herds of cattle, and served that the Philistines became jealous of him. So the Philistines filled up all Isaac's wells with dirt, and these were wells that had been dug by the servant of his fathers Abraham. Finally, Abraham ordered Isaac to leave the country. "Go somewhere else," he said, "for you have become too powerful for us." So Isaac moved away to Gerar Valley, where he set up their tents and settled down, and he reopened the wells his father had dug, which the Philistines had filled. And after Abraham's death, Isaac also restored the name of Abraham had given him. Isaac's servants also dug in the Gerar Valley and discovered a well of fresh water. But more than when the shepherds from Gerar came and claimed the spring, "This is our water," they said. And they argued over it with Isaac's herdsmen. So Isaac named the well Esek, which means argument. Isaac's men then dug another well. But again, there was a dispute over it, so Isaac named it Sidnah, which means hostility. Abandoning that one, Isaac moved on and dug another well, and this time there was no dispute over it. So Isaac named the place Ruboth, which means space, for he said, "At last the Lord has created enough space for us to prosper in this land." From there, Isaac moved to Beersheba, where the Lord appeared to him on the night of his arrival. "I am the God of your father Abraham," he said. "Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you. I will multiply your descendants, and they will become a great nation. I will do this because of my promise to Abraham, my servant." Then Isaac built an altar there and worshipped the Lord, and he set up his camp at the place, and his servants dug another well. Isaac's comment with Ishmael. One day the king Ephraim came from Gerar with the advisor Uzzah and also Prisha, his army commander. Why have you come here?" Isaac asked. "You obviously hate me since you kicked me off your land." They replied, "We can plainly see that the Lord is with you, so we want to enter into a sworn treaty with you. Let's make a covenant and swear that you will not harm us, just as we never troubled you. We have always treated you well, and we sent you away from us in peace. And now look how the Lord has blessed you." So Isaac prepared a covenant feast to celebrate the treaty, and they ate and drank together. Early the next morning, they each took a solemn oath not to interfere with each other. Then Isaac sent them home again, and he left him in peace. That very day, Isaac's servants came and told him about a new well, and they dug. "And we found water there." "We found water," they exclaimed. So Isaac named the well Shabbat, which means oath. And to this day, the town that grew up there is called Beersheba, which means well of the oath. At the age of 40, Ezra married two Hittite wives, Judah, the daughter of Beer, and Beersheba, the daughter of Elon. But Ezra's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. So we're going to stop right there, the last chapter of Genesis 26. And I'm going to pray, a lot of prayer. Father God, thank you for waking me up this morning. I don't deserve anything of you, of your good deeds that you always give me, even though I'm a guilty sinner. Cleanse my heart and change my heart. Change my mindset and let it be loving continually in my heart. Focus on you and not the distractions around me that's trying to distract me. And my enemies, I pray for them, that they seek you. Salvation, or apart from you, they would be destroyed in hell, you know. So I pray that you give them the desire to seek you. And I pray for my social media people that they are well, and the ones that are not seeking you, that they seek you. And I pray, and you are the Father of the only God of this universe, and I will not denounce you because somebody is offended of my faith and wanting me pronounced out to my beliefs. I will never do that. Ever. I reclaim that you are the only God of the universe. Always. And I will worship you only. And I thank you for everything that you created. And I thank you for all you have done in my life. I ask you give me wisdom and keep me strong each day as I'm living in this place. As you know, there are no distractions. I get these bad vibes around me. But I pray that you let my eyes be seeking on you regardless of what's going on around me, negative, and not focus on that. And give me wisdom and a strong desire, and forgive me for all my sins, and change my heart and make it new. Cleanse me. Amen. So the next time we read Genesis, we'll be at Genesis 27. Let me read this quick article in the Bible. It says Rebecca was a woman of action. Her hospitality to Abraham's servant helped her become Isaac's wife, and Rebecca and Isaac had twin sons, Esau and Jacob. God had promised Rebecca that Esau, the older son, would someday serve Jacob, the younger son. And when Isaac prepared to give this special blessing to Esau, Rebecca helped Jacob trick Isaac into giving Jacob the blessing instead. Esau was so angry, he wanted to kill Jacob. Rebecca did something wrong to help God's plan, and she made a mess. No matter how good our goals, we shouldn't do wrong to achieve them. You can read more about Rebecca in Genesis chapter 24 and 27. Yeah, we're at 27. The next one, we'll read that one. Yeah, we stopped at 26. So we'll read to 27 to 31 to 40. We'll read that one next. Anyway, thanks for listening.